the forgotten legend. The Grand Assembly Hall floated in the heart of the Galactic Federation's capital station, a massive structure that orbited the binary stars of the Celestia system. Inside the crystalline chamber, representatives from 300 different species gathered for what most considered another routine session. The air hummed with the soft translation fields that allowed every being to understand one another, regardless of their native language or communication method. Historian Vex adjusted his optical sensors nervously as he stood before the assembly. His species, the Archivists, were known throughout the galaxy for their dedication to preserving knowledge. Their slender frames and multiple arms made them perfect for handling ancient documents and data crystals. Today, however, Vex wished he had stayed in his library instead of bringing his findings to this intimidating audience. Honored representatives, Vex began, his voice trembling slightly through the translation field. I have spent the last 3 cycles investigating anomalous signals detected from the dead sector, the region we have avoided for 10,000 years. A ripple of mild interest passed through the chamber, though most representatives continued their own conversations. The dead sector was old news, a quarantined zone that everyone knew about but nobody cared to discuss. It was simply empty space, devoid of life, avoided by ancient treaty that nobody remembered the reason for anymore. Supreme Coordinator Nala, a being of flowing liquid metal who led the Federation Council, gestured for Vex to continue. Her form shifted into a shape that suggested polite attention, though Vex suspected she was merely being courteous. The signals match patterns described in the oldest archives, Vex continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed complex waveforms and energy signatures. They correspond to references found in texts that predate the Federation itself. References to a species called humanity. References to Earth. The chamber erupted in laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind reserved for someone who had fallen for an obvious joke. Even Nala's metallic form rippled with what could only be amusement. Historian Vex, spoke Ambassador Krell, a massive insectoid being from the warrior caste of Zenther. Despite his species' military background, even the Zentharians had abandoned warfare 3,000 years ago. Surely you do not believe in the Earth fairy tales? Those stories were invented by our ancestors to frighten children into cooperation. The monster species that refused to join peaceful civilization, added Representative Thora, whose plant-based biology made her species naturally peaceful. The violent primitives who supposedly destroyed themselves in atomic fire. These are cautionary tales, not history. Vex's optical sensors dimmed with embarrassment, but he pressed forward. I have examined the original documents, honored representatives. The Treaty of the Void, signed 10 millennia ago, specifically mentions Earth and humanity as protectors of the Federation. It describes them as fierce warriors who agreed to isolate themselves in the dead sector in exchange for a promise. What promise? Nala asked, her tone suggesting she was humoring him. That if the Federation ever faced an existential threat, we would activate an emergency beacon. The beacon coordinates are still in our systems. The encryption keys are still valid. And the signals I detected suggest someone in the dead sector is listening. More laughter filled the chamber. Krell's antennae twitched with amusement. And I suppose these mythical humans have been sitting in empty space for 10,000 years, just waiting for us to call? What have they been eating, historian? Starlight. The archives suggest they colonized multiple systems within the dead sector before the isolation began. The treaty granted them exclusive access to that entire region. 73 star systems, many with habitable worlds. Enough, Nala said, though not unkindly. Historian Vex, we appreciate your dedication to research. However, the Council has pressing matters to address. The Void Collective has been expanding into Federation space. 5 colonies have gone silent in the past month. We need practical solutions, not ancient mythology. The mention of the Void Collective sobered the chamber. The parasitic hive mind had emerged from beyond the galactic rim 6 months ago, and nothing the Federation had tried could stop them. Diplomatic envoys were absorbed into the collective consciousness. Trade sanctions meant nothing to beings who consumed entire biospheres. Even the Zentharian Defense Fleet, the only military force the Federation maintained, had been unable to slow their advance. Perhaps, Vex said quietly, the ancient mythology is the practical solution. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Nala spoke, her tone gentle but firm. The Federation has maintained peace for 5,000 years through understanding and cooperation. We will not abandon our principles because of one threat. This session is concluded. Representatives began filing out, returning to their duties. Most had already forgotten about Vex and his presentation. They had real problems to solve, problems that required real solutions, not fantasies about warrior species from children's stories. Only one being approached Vex as the chamber emptied. Commander Zara of the Xantharian Defense Fleet moved with the precise efficiency of a trained soldier, though her weapons had not been fired in anger for generations. Her species maintained their military traditions as a cultural practice, not because they expected to need them. "I believe you saw something real," Zara said, her compound eyes reflecting genuine concern. "But understand, most of them have never known war. Their ancestors' never knew war. To them, military force is as mythical as your humans." "What about the Void Collective?" Vex asked. "You mentioned 5 colonies. How many have we really lost?" Zara's mandibles clicked in distress. 8 as of this morning. 2 more went silent during your presentation. The collective is not slowing down. They are accelerating. My fleet is spread across a dozen systems, trying to evacuate civilians ahead of their advance. We cannot fight them. We can only run. How long before they reach the core systems? 3 months, maybe less. Zara placed a clawed hand on Vex's shoulder. "Keep investigating your signals, historian. I hope you are wrong about humans existing. But I also hope you are right. Because if they are real, we are going to need them very soon." Vex returned to his archive station, located in a quiet section of the capital that most Federation citizens never visited. His people believed that knowledge was sacred, that every piece of information deserved to be preserved and protected. The archive itself was vast, containing data crystals and physical documents from thousands of civilizations across millions of years. He pulled up the signals again on his primary console. The waveforms pulsed with steady regularity, definitely artificial, definitely intelligent. They were scanning, probing, watching the galaxy beyond the dead sector boundary. Whatever was out there had technology, organization, and purpose. Vex began cross-referencing the signals with the oldest documents he could access. Most civilizations had purged their pre-Federation records, embarrassed by their violent pasts. But fragments remained. References to a species that fought with terrifying efficiency. Descriptions of ships built for war, not exploration. Accounts of soldiers who never stopped, never surrendered, never accepted defeat. And then there was the Treaty of the Void itself. Vex had found it in a secure archive, protected by encryption that had taken him months to break. The document was signed by the founding members of the early Federation and representatives of something called the Terran Alliance. The treaty promised mutual defense. If the Federation faced existential danger, Earth would respond to a specific beacon signal. Most historians claimed the treaty was fabricated, created to add legitimacy to the Federation's formation. The beacon coordinates pointed to empty space. The encryption keys led nowhere. The whole thing was obviously fake. Vex decided to check anyway. The beacon control system was buried deep in the oldest part of the Federation's communication network. The interface looked ancient, its commands written in a dialect so outdated that Vex had to run it through multiple translation matrices. The system had not been accessed in over 9,000 years. He entered the coordinates from the treaty. The system accepted them without error. He entered the encryption key sequence. The system began a startup procedure. Vex's hands hesitated over the activation command. If he was wrong, nothing would happen and he would waste power on a useless transmission. If he was right, something would answer. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for 10,000 years. His console chimed with an urgent alert. Another colony had gone silent. The 9th in a month. The Void Collective was consuming the Federation faster than anyone had predicted. Vex pressed the activation command. The beacon transmitted for exactly 3 seconds. A burst of compressed data fired toward the dead sector using quantum-entangled particles that traveled instantaneously across space. Then the system went dormant again, having fulfilled its programmed purpose after millennia of waiting. For several minutes nothing happened. Vex stared at his screens, wondering if he had just made himself an even bigger fool than before. Perhaps the Council was right. Perhaps humans were just stories after all. Then every sensor array in Federation space detected the same thing simultaneously. A massive power spike from the dead sector. Energy signatures that matched nothing in any database. Spatial distortions that suggested something enormous was moving through faster-than-light space, creating gravitational waves strong enough to detect from thousands of light-years away. Vex's communication console exploded with incoming calls. Federation officials who had dismissed him now demanded explanations. What had he done? What was happening? What was coming? The answer arrived 3 hours later. Space itself tore open at the edge of the Celestia system. Not once but 17 times. Massive vessels emerged from the wounds in reality, each one larger than any Federation ship, bristling with structures that could only be weapons. They moved with purpose and precision, forming a battle formation that suggested centuries of military practice. The lead ship broadcast on all frequencies. The language was harsh, guttural, filled with sounds that no Federation species had ever made. Then it switched to perfect galactic standard, though with an accent that sounded ancient and foreign. "This is Admiral Rebecca Stone of the United Earth ship Defiant, commanding the Terran First Response Fleet. We received your distress call. Earth remembers its commitments. Requesting immediate tactical briefing on current threat status." The Federation Communications Center remained absolutely silent. 300 species, thousands of years of civilization, countless worlds of philosophy and culture, all frozen in shock. Humans were real. Earth existed. And they had come to war. Warriors from the void. The arrival of the Terran fleet sent shockwaves through every corner of Federation space. Within hours, every news network, every data stream, and every communication channel was flooded with images of the 17 warships that now held position at the edge of the Celestia system. The vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. Where Federation ships were elegant, designed with aesthetic beauty and comfort in mind, the human ships were brutal in their efficiency. Every curve served a purpose. Every surface was reinforced. These were not ships built for exploration or trade. These were instruments of war. Supreme Coordinator Nala convened an emergency session of the Federation Council. The crystalline chamber that had been half empty during Vex's presentation was now packed beyond capacity. Representatives who had laughed at the mention of Earth now pushed forward, desperate to see the humans for themselves. The main view screen displayed the Terran fleet in high resolution, and the sight of those warships made even the most peaceful species feel a primal stirring of something long forgotten. Fear mixed with hope in equal measure. Admiral Rebecca Stone appeared on the view screen moments after Nala sent the invitation. The human was tall and lean, with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to measure everything they saw. She wore a dark blue uniform covered in insignias that meant nothing to the Federation, but the way she carried herself spoke volumes. This was someone who had spent a lifetime preparing for war. "Supreme Coordinator Nala," Stone said, her voice crisp and professional. "Thank you for the prompt response. My crew has been monitoring your public broadcast for the past 3 hours, updating our translation databases and gathering intelligence on the current situation. Before we proceed, I need to confirm something. Are you truly facing an existential threat, or was the beacon activation a mistake?" Nala's liquid metal form rippled with emotions she rarely displayed. "Admiral Stone, I must confess that until 3 hours ago, most of us believed your species was mythological. The beacon was activated by historian Vex against Council recommendations. However, the threat is very real. The Void Collective has consumed 9 of our colonies in the past month. We have been unable to stop them." Stone's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "The Void Collective. We detected their presence approximately 6 months ago when they first entered this region of space. We have been observing their expansion patterns. They are a parasitic hive mind, correct? They consume biological material and integrate it into their collective consciousness." "Yes," Commander Zara interjected, stepping forward. "My fleet has engaged them twice. Both times we were forced to retreat. Their ships regenerate damage faster than we can inflict it. They do not negotiate. They do not communicate. They simply consume and expand." Stone nodded slowly. "We are familiar with similar entities. Approximately 4,000 years ago, Earth encountered something called the Swarm in our sector of the Dead Zone. It took us 70 years to eliminate them completely. The tactics we developed during that conflict will be applicable here." The chamber erupted in murmurs. 70 years of warfare was incomprehensible to most Federation species. The longest military conflict in modern Federation history had lasted 3 weeks before diplomatic solutions were found. "Admiral," Nala said carefully, "I must ask, what has Earth been doing for the past 10,000 years? Why did you isolate yourselves in the dead sector?" Stone's expression softened slightly, and for the first time, something like sadness crossed her face. "Because we terrified you. When the Federation was first forming, humanity was invited to join. We wanted to participate, to be part of a galactic community. But our nature made other species uncomfortable. We had just emerged from a period of global warfare. We had weapons designed to destroy entire planets. We thought in terms of tactics and strategy when others thought in terms of cooperation and harmony." She paused, and the chamber remained silent, hanging on every word. The Treaty of the Void was a compromise, Stone continued. We agreed to isolate ourselves, to remove our destabilizing presence from galactic politics. In exchange, the Federation promised to call us if they ever faced a threat they could not handle peacefully. We took 73 star systems, colonized 26 worlds, and spent 10,000 years doing what humans do best. We prepared. We built. We trained. We never forgot that somewhere out there you might need us. Vex, who had been standing at the back of the chamber, felt his optical sensors blur with emotion. You waited for us. For 10,000 years. We kept our word, Stone replied simply. Now we need tactical information. Show me everything you know about the Void Collective. Ship configurations, attack patterns, expansion vectors, resource consumption rates. Everything. For the next 6 hours, the Federation shared everything they had compiled about their enemy. Stone and her officers absorbed the information with frightening efficiency, asking pointed questions that revealed a military mindset the Federation had long forgotten. They wanted to know about supply lines, strategic bottlenecks, and vulnerable infrastructure. They spoke in terms that required translation into concepts the Federation barely understood anymore. Finally, Stone leaned back in her chair. The Void Collective's main armada is currently 3 weeks away from your core systems. They have approximately 1,500 vessels, based on your sensor data. However, they are spread across multiple attack vectors, which means they are vulnerable to concentrated strikes against their supply chains. 1,500 ships, Krell said, his antennae drooping with despair. Admiral, you have 17 vessels. Even with your superior technology, surely the mathematics are impossible. Stone smiled then, and it was not a comfortable expression. It was the smile of a predator that had found worthy prey. Ambassador Krell, humanity learned a long time ago that warfare is not about mathematics. It is about will, creativity, and the willingness to do what your enemy does not expect. We do not plan to engage their main armada directly. We plan to make them come to us on our terms. How? Nala asked. By hitting them where they are weakest. The Void Collective requires massive amounts of biological material to sustain itself. Based on your data, they have established processing centers on each conquered world where they convert biomass into fuel for their ships and troops. These centers are lightly defended because they assume no one will strike at them. We are going to destroy every processing center they have established. Without fuel, their fleet will be forced to withdraw or starve. Commander Zara's mandibles clicked with something that might have been excitement. A logistics campaign. Striking at their supply lines rather than their military strength. It is brilliant but also incredibly dangerous. Those processing centers are deep in collective-controlled space. You would have to penetrate their territory, strike multiple targets simultaneously, and escape before their fleet can respond. Yes, Stone agreed. That is exactly what we are going to do. And we are going to do it in 72 hours. The chamber erupted in protests. 72 hours was not enough time to plan such a complex operation. The risks were enormous. The chances of success seemed minimal. But Stone simply waited for the noise to die down before continuing. I need volunteers from the Federation. Pilots who know this region of space. Engineers who can interface with our systems. Anyone with military experience, even if it is outdated. We will provide training and equipment, but we need local knowledge. Zara stepped forward immediately. My entire fleet volunteers. All 400 ships and 10,000 crew members. Stone nodded with approval. Accepted. Report to the Defiant within 6 hours for tactical briefing and equipment integration. Anyone else? Slowly, hesitantly, others began to volunteer. Young beings from species that had never known war, driven by desperation and hope. Old soldiers from races that still maintained ceremonial defense forces. Scientists and engineers who wanted to contribute to the defense of their civilization. Within 2 hours, over 15,000 Federation citizens had volunteered to join the human war effort. While preparations began, Vex found himself granted access to the Defiant's archives, a gesture of goodwill from Admiral Stone. What he discovered there both fascinated and terrified him. The humans had not been idle during their isolation. They had built a civilization spanning 26 worlds. They had developed technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics. They had maintained a standing military force of over 50 million personnel, constantly training for a war they hoped would never come. But more than that, they had preserved something the Federation had lost. They remembered what it meant to fight for survival. They understood that peace was not the natural state of the universe, but something that had to be protected and sometimes fought for. They had kept their teeth sharp while the rest of the galaxy had filed theirs down to nothing. The human archive contained detailed records of conflicts spanning millennia. Wars against alien threats in the dead sector that the Federation had never known about. Battles against rogue artificial intelligences, spaceborne predators, and dimensional incursions. Each conflict had taught them new lessons, developed new tactics, and hardened their resolve. One record in particular caught Vex's attention. A document titled The Long Watch, written by one of the original treaty signers 4,000 years ago. The human author had written about the loneliness of isolation, the weight of preparing for a call that might never come, and the determination to honor their commitment regardless of the cost. "We are the guardians in the darkness," the document read. "We are the sword that sleeps but never rusts. We are the shield that stands ready even when forgotten. The Federation may not remember us, may not believe we exist, may even think we are monsters from their nightmares. But we will be there when they need us, because that is what we promised. And humans keep their promises." Vex felt his optical sensors blur again as he read those words. 10,000 years of waiting. 10,000 years of preparation. All for a people who had forgotten they existed. The attack began exactly 72 hours after the Terran fleet's arrival, and it was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. The combined Human Federation force split into 7 strike groups, each targeting a different Void Collective processing center. The human warships moved through space with aggressive confidence, their drives creating gravitational signatures that seemed to challenge the universe itself. Federation vessels struggled to keep up, their crews amazed by the speeds and maneuvers the humans maintained without apparent strain. The first processing center was located on a moon orbiting a gas giant in the Tertius system. The Void Collective had converted the entire lunar surface into a massive organic factory, processing the biomass from 2 consumed colonies. Collective ships patrolled the area, but their formations were lazy, complacent. They had never faced real resistance before. Admiral Stone's voice came through on all channels, calm and authoritative. "All ships, this is Defiant Actual. Remember your training. Stay in formation. Trust your wingmates, and do not hesitate. The Collective cannot be reasoned with. They can only be destroyed. All units, you are weapons-free. Let us remind the galaxy why humans are feared." The strike group dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the processing center, giving the Collective mere seconds to react. The humans opened fire immediately, their weapons systems unleashing devastation that made Federation observers gasp in shock. Brilliant beams of coherent light burned through Collective ships like they were made of paper. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through organic hulls and detonated inside with catastrophic results. Missiles with advanced guidance systems danced through defensive fire and struck with surgical precision. But what truly amazed the Federation volunteers was how the humans fought. They did not maintain safe distances or rely on defensive formations. They dove into the Collective fleet like predators attacking prey, using the enemy's own ships as cover, exploiting every moment of confusion, turning the Collective's numbers against them. A human destroyer, the Damascus, found itself surrounded by 5 Collective vessels. Instead of retreating, the ship accelerated toward the nearest enemy, fired a full missile spread at point-blank range, then used the explosion as cover to slip past the debris and strike another target from behind. The Damascus emerged from the engagement with minor damage while all 5 Collective ships were destroyed or disabled. Commander Zara, flying alongside the human ships in her modified cruiser, watched in awe. They fight like the universe is their weapon. Everything is a tool. Everything is an advantage. "Because we learned that we had to," came a response from Lieutenant Marcus Chin, a human pilot flying escort. "When you are outnumbered and outgunned, you cannot afford to fight fair. You have to fight smart." The processing center itself was a massive structure, its organic architecture pulsing with the absorbed life energy of billions of beings. The humans showed no hesitation. Precision strikes from capital ships severed the center's power systems. Bombers dove through defensive fire to plant explosive charges at structural weak points. Within 20 minutes, the entire facility was collapsing, its stored biomass scattered into space where the Collective could not reclaim it. Similar scenes played out across 7 systems simultaneously. The Void Collective, accustomed to easy victories against an enemy that would not fight back, suddenly faced opposition that was skilled, determined, and utterly ruthless when necessary. Their ships, designed to overwhelm through numbers and regeneration, could not adapt fast enough to opponents who struck from unexpected angles and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. By the time the Collective's main armada realized what was happening and moved to respond, all 7 processing centers were destroyed and the strike groups had vanished back into faster-than-light travel. The humans had not lost a single ship. Collective losses exceeded 300 vessels and 7 critical infrastructure sites. When the strike groups returned to Celestia system, they were greeted by something the Federation had not experienced in 5,000 years. Victory celebrations. Citizens from hundreds of species filled the observation decks, watching the warships return. Some cheered. Some wept with relief. Some simply stared in wonder at the beings who had emerged from myth to save them. Admiral Stone addressed the Federation Council from the bridge of the Defiant, her crew visible behind her, exhausted but triumphant. Supreme Coordinator Nala, the Void Collective's logistics network has been crippled. Their main armada is now unsustainable. Based on our analysis, they will be forced to withdraw from Federation space within 2 weeks or face starvation. However, we recommend pursuing them back to their origin point and eliminating the threat entirely. Wounded predators are still dangerous. Nala's form shimmered with emotions that her species rarely displayed publicly. Admiral Stone, the Federation owes humanity a debt that can never be fully repaid. You have saved us from extinction. You have reminded us of truths we had forgotten. We would be honored if you would help us finish this war. Stone smiled, and this time it was warm and genuine. We would be honored to fight alongside you. But understand something, Supreme Coordinator. This is not just about eliminating the Void Collective. This is about teaching the Federation to defend itself. We will not always be here. You need to remember how to be strong, how to stand up to threats, how to protect what you have built. We will help you win this war, but more importantly, we will help you prepare for the next one. Over the following weeks, the combined Human Federation fleet pursued the Void Collective back to their origin point beyond the galactic rim. The campaign was brutal and costly, but with human tactics and training, the Federation forces began to remember skills their ancestors had abandoned. They learned to think strategically, to exploit enemy weaknesses, to accept necessary risks in pursuit of victory. The final battle took place in a dying star system where the collective had established their primary hive. The engagement lasted 3 days and involved over 2,000 ships from both sides. The humans led the assault, their warships carving paths through enemy formations that Federation vessels could follow. When the collective's queen ship, a massive organism the size of a small moon, tried to escape, it was Admiral Stone herself who led the final strike, guiding her ship directly into the creature's core and detonating a quantum torpedo that collapsed the entire structure from within. Stone and her crew escaped with seconds to spare, their ship heavily damaged but intact. As the queen ship exploded, taking the collective's central consciousness with it, the remaining enemy vessels simply stopped. Without the guiding intelligence, they were just organic machines that quickly died in the vacuum of space. The war was over. The Void Collective was eliminated, and the galaxy had changed forever. In the aftermath, the Federation and Earth formalized a new treaty. Humanity would no longer isolate itself in the dead sector. They would maintain their own sovereign territory, but they would also integrate with the broader galactic community. In exchange, they would help the Federation rebuild its defense capabilities, teaching willing species how to protect themselves without abandoning their peaceful principles. Historian Vex was given the honor of archiving the entire conflict, creating a record that would ensure future generations would never forget. As he compiled the data, Admiral Stone visited him one final time before the Terran fleet departed for home. "You saved us all, you know," Vex said, his optical sensors focusing on the human admiral. "By activating that beacon. By believing when no one else did." Stone shook her head gently. "No, historian. You saved yourselves by having the courage to ask for help. There is no shame in admitting you need assistance. The real strength is knowing when to fight and when to seek allies. The Federation forgot that lesson, but you are learning it again. What will Earth do now?" Vex asked. Stone gazed out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "We will go home. We will continue our watch. And we will hope that next time you need us, it takes less than 10,000 years for you to call. But we will be ready, historian. We will always be ready. Because that is what humans do. We keep our promises, we protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we never, ever give up." As the Terran fleet prepared to depart, the entire Federation watched. The 17 warships that had arrived to save them now moved back toward the dead sector, back to the worlds humanity had made their own during their long isolation. But this time they were not leaving in shame or exile. They were leaving as honored allies, as remembered friends, as legends that had proven themselves to be gloriously, terrifyingly real. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Peace was precious, but it required strength to maintain. Cooperation was ideal, but sometimes survival required warriors. And Earth, forgotten for 10,000 years, had been waiting patiently in the darkness, ready to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. Humanity would always answer the call.